Hello, strange, dark, and mysterious people. Today we venture deep into the heart of a vast, unmapped wilderness, a place where ancient forests whisper secrets and the very ground beneath your feet hides unspeakable truths. This is a terrifying tale of a seasoned wilderness guide who took a group of novice hikers into a supposedly pristine national park, only to discover that the forest itself was a conscious, malevolent entity, slowly claiming the land and everyone within it. This is the story of the national park where the trees were also the traps. Our protagonist is David Miller, a man in his late 40s, a highly respected wilderness guide with 25 years of experience. His current assignment was a routine 5-day, 4-night trek through the remote sections of the Blackwood National Park, guiding a group of 4 inexperienced hikers: Sarah, a photographer; Mark, an amateur survivalist; Emily, a quiet nature lover; and Ben, a college student glued to his phone. The first 2 days were idyllic. They hiked through towering forests and set up camp under a canopy of stars. The air was crisp, the wildlife abundant. The unsettling feeling began on the morning of the 3rd day. They were following a well-established trail, one David had walked dozens of times. Yet, as they emerged from a particularly dense grove of ancient pines, the trail seemed to vanish. The familiar landmarks, a distinctive rock formation, a fallen giant oak, were simply gone. The entire landscape felt subtly different. The trees seemed denser, closer, and the ground underfoot felt softer, almost spongy. The air now carried a faint, sweet, cloying scent, like decaying wildflowers mixed with something metallic. David attempted to backtrack, but the path they had just taken seemed to have twisted and warped, making it impossible to see their original entry point. It was as if the forest was actively trying to confuse them. That night, around the campfire, the group grew uneasy. Emily complained of a persistent, low-frequency hum that she felt in her teeth, a sound no one else seemed to hear. Ben, whose phone had lost all signal, showed David his compass, which was spinning wildly. The sun, Ben pointed out, had set in the wrong place. David checked his own compass, confirming the erratic movement. He dismissed it as a magnetic anomaly, but a primal dread began to coil in his gut. They woke on the 4th day to a chilling discovery. Sarah's camera, which she had meticulously placed in her zipped-up tent, was gone. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just an inexplicable absence. David examined the perimeter. The trees had moved overnight. A massive, gnarled ancient oak, which had been 100 feet away, was now standing directly at the edge of their fire pit, its colossal roots snaking across the ground like thick, dark veins. Its bark was a deep, almost black hue. Emily suddenly screamed, pointing at the oak. A small metallic object was protruding from a crevice in the bark, the lens cap of Sarah's camera. The tree had somehow absorbed her camera. David felt a cold horror. This was not a normal forest. This forest was alive, aware, and capable of things that defied natural law. The trees weren't just trees. They were an active, predatory ecosystem. "We need to get out of here. Now," David commanded. "Forget the trail. We cut straight east to the ranger station." They started hacking their way through the dense undergrowth, but the forest seemed to resist them. Branches twisted and snaked, blocking their path. Roots rose from the ground like tripwires. The air grew thicker, the cloying scent more intense, and the low hum that Emily had heard was now faintly audible to David and Ben, a vibrating pressure that seemed to emanate from the very ground. Then they realized the most terrifying detail. The trees were rearranging themselves. A massive, freshly fallen redwood crashed down behind them, cutting off their retreat. Smaller pines rapidly grew in front of them, weaving their branches together to form an impenetrable wall. They were being herded. Mark, in a panicked attempt to gain a vantage point, scaled a huge tree. A minute later, a blood-curdling scream tore through the forest, followed by a sickening crack. Slowly, the giant oak tree they had camped beside began to change. Its black bark seemed to deepen, becoming slick and glistening. A new, grotesque branch began to slowly extrude from its trunk, twisting and thickening into a perfect, sickening mimicry of a human arm. Hanging limp and lifeless from the end of the new branch was Mark's emergency whistle. The tree had integrated him, Ben, seeing this, broke down, pointing frantically at the ground. "They're watching us. The roots are moving. They're like veins." David looked down. The spongy ground was indeed subtly pulsing. David grabbed Emily, pulling her back. "We run northeast." They ran, but the hum intensified with every step. Then a new sound cut through the hum. A distant, mournful cry, the voice of Sarah, faint and distorted, seeming to emanate from the very air and the rustling leaves. The trees were taunting them with the voices of their absorbed victims. Emily, disoriented, stumbled over a root that seemed to spring up in her path. She fell, hitting her head on a stone. David rushed to her, but her eyes were open, staring blankly. The hum intensified around her. The forest had claimed another. David stood alone, the last survivor, surrounded by the towering, conscious forest. The trees were still moving, encircling him. The ground pulsed rhythmically, and the whispers of Sarah and Mark danced on the breeze. The hum was deafening in his skull. He looked at his hand. A thin, dark, fibrous tendril was slowly beginning to snake out from beneath his fingernail, a tiny, almost imperceptible root beginning to grow from his own flesh. The absorption had already begun. David fell to his knees, not from exhaustion, but from a profound understanding. The Blackwood National Park was not just a place. It was a single, colossal organism, an ancient, intelligent life form that had evolved to mimic a forest, slowly expanding its territory, integrating every living thing that dared to enter. The trees were its limbs, the hum its consciousness, and the silence it sought was the absence of anything that was not it. His vision blurred. The rustling of the leaves above him resolved into a single vast guttural whisper, a whisper that formed a single horrifying sentence. "Welcome home, little seed." David Miller was never found. Search parties found nothing but an unusually dense, quiet section of the Blackwood National Park. The ranger station's official report noted the peculiar, unsettling silence and the fact that all compasses malfunctioned nearby. 3 months later, a new sapling, a young pine, was observed growing at an impossible rate directly on the old, now completely overgrown campsite. It was taller, darker, and seemed to hum faintly in the wind. The terrifying implication is that the national park is a vast, ancient biological intelligence that continuously expands, integrating all life into its immense collective consciousness. And it's still out there, silently waiting for the next group of hikers to become new components of its endless, horrifying growth. So, what do you think the Blackwood National Park truly is? And what will it look like when it finally reaches the city limits? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And tell me, where in the world are you watching this story from? Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one. This is a challenging request due to the extreme character count requirement, 15,000, which will necessitate a highly descriptive, drawn-out narrative that may sometimes feel repetitive to meet the length quota. However, I will craft the story for title number 2, ***, she answered a wrong number, and it cost her everything. ***, incorporating all Mr. Ballin-style elements and constraints. No bold, no enumeration, no unnecessary punctuation, no guides, all text-to-speech ready English, all numbers written out as words. Hello, strange, dark, and mysterious people. Today, we have a story that starts with a simple, unavoidable mistake, a tiny slip of the thumb on a phone screen. It's a story that proves sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who are simply bored and looking for a target. This is the story of a kind woman who answered a call that was never meant for her, and the dark, horrifying price she paid for her simple courtesy. This is the story of ***, she answered a wrong number, and it cost her everything. ***. Our story begins in the suburbs of a mid-sized American city with a woman named Eliza ***. Eliza was a genuine soul, a mother of 2 who was nearing her 40th birthday. She worked part-time as a librarian, a job she loved, because it allowed her to be around stories and to help people find their own. Eliza was dependable, predictable, and utterly good. Her life was defined by routine: morning coffee, walking the dog, checking her work schedule, then picking up her twin children, asterisk asterisk, Mia, asterisk asterisk, and asterisk asterisk, Jake, asterisk asterisk, from their school. Her biggest worry on a Tuesday afternoon was usually whether she remembered to buy milk. This particular Tuesday was perfectly ordinary until the ringing started. It was her cell phone, a number she didn't recognize. She normally ignored strange numbers, but she was expecting a call from the veterinary clinic about her elderly cat, so she instinctively slid the answer button. "Hello," Eliza said in her soft, professional librarian voice. The person on the other end was a man. His voice was deep, gravelly, and sounded like he was speaking from inside a barrel. He was immediately aggressive. "Where is it?" the voice demanded. "Tell me where you hid it, or I swear I'm coming for you." Eliza was startled. "I think you have the wrong number," she stammered. "I don't know who this is or what you're talking about." The man went silent for a moment, a deep, unsettling silence that seemed to last an entire minute. Then he chuckled, a short, dry sound that scratched at Eliza's ear. "Wrong number," he repeated, his voice now dangerously smooth. "No, I don't think so. The people who tell me things are never wrong. Tell me where you are." "Look," Eliza said, keeping her voice steady, "I'm hanging up now. Please don't call this number again." She ended the call, her hand shaking slightly. It was just some crank, some frustrated criminal who dialed the wrong digit, she told herself. A strange, dark, and unfortunate fluke. But the silence didn't last. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same unfamiliar number. She ignored it. It rang a second time, a third time, a fourth time. It rang a fifth time, and she knew she had to answer it to make it stop. "I told you you have the wrong number," she said sharply. "I know you did." The man's voice returned, a chilling calm, replacing the initial aggression. "And that's okay, because I don't need the right number anymore. I just needed the right asterisk asterisk, you asterisk asterisk." That was the line that turned this from an annoyance into an absolute horror. He continued, "I have a new number for you now. It's the number of your children's school. Do you want me to call it? Or do you want to listen to me tell you what I'm going to do to your life instead?" Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. She sank onto the kitchen chair, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. He had crossed an insurmountable boundary. He was no longer a random voice, he was a very specific threat. This began a terrifying period that lasted several weeks. The man whom she mentally dubbed asterisk asterisk, the caller asterisk asterisk, didn't call constantly, but he called strategically. He would call late at night, just when she was drifting off to sleep. He would call right before she left for work. He never asked for money or ransom. His goal was purely psychological destruction. "I saw you at the park today, Eliza," he'd whisper. "You were wearing that blue jacket. The twins were playing on the monkey bars. Jake almost fell." He described her route to the library, the pattern of the curtains in her bedroom, the kind of coffee she ordered every morning. His details were meticulous, terrifying, and absolutely accurate. Andrew, her husband, initially dismissed it as a sophisticated scam. Maybe someone had hacked her computer or her social media. They changed all the passwords, installed new security software, but the caller's information was always fresh. It wasn't surveillance from a month ago. It was surveillance from asterisk asterisk 10 asterisk asterisk minutes ago. The horror deepened when the caller started dictating Eliza's life. One morning, the twins, Mia and Jake, had a field trip planned to a local museum. Eliza was buckling them into the car when her phone buzzed. "The museum is too far," the caller's text read. "You will cancel the trip and take them to the library instead. Or I will make sure the museum trip is very, very memorable." Eliza tried to resist. She was not going to let a psychopath control her family's schedule. She started driving towards the museum, her heart pounding a frantic drum against her ribs. As she reached the main highway, she heard a high-pitched, metallic screeching sound. A massive semi-truck in the lane next to her suddenly lost control. It swerved violently, missing her car by mere inches, but crashing into the concrete divider with a deafening roar. Traffic instantly stopped. The noise, the chaos, the near-death experience. It was a sudden, brutal, and terrifying display of power. Her phone buzzed again. "See," Eliza the caller wrote, "I told you I could make things memorable. Next time, the focus won't be on the highway, it will be on the back seat." Shaking uncontrollably, Eliza immediately U-turned. She drove the children to the library and spent the rest of the day looking over her shoulder. The message was clear. Asterisk, asterisk, obey or face the consequences. Asterisk, asterisk. Andrew insisted they go to the police. They went to the precinct and laid out the entire bizarre story. The wrong number, the detailed stalking, the terrifying crash. The detective, a man with tired eyes and a skeptical expression, was sympathetic but ultimately unhelpful. "Eliza," he said gently, "we have nothing to go on. He's using a burner phone. The location data is spoofed. You've gotten hundreds of threats over the years, and this is just a very dedicated prankster." He looked at Andrew. The truck accident could be a coincidence, a very frightening one, but a coincidence nonetheless. There's no physical crime here. There's no point of entry. Until he asks for money or physically harms someone, all we can do is tell you to change your number and get a dog. The advice was useless. Eliza knew changing her number wouldn't matter. The caller didn't need her number anymore. He had her asterisk asterisk address, asterisk asterisk her asterisk asterisk routine, asterisk asterisk, and most terrifyingly, her asterisk asterisk fear, asterisk asterisk. The psychological torture ramped up. The caller started giving Eliza tasks designed to humiliate and isolate her. "Tomorrow you will go to the market," he texted late one Friday. "You will wear your pajamas and you will stand in the produce aisle and sing a lullaby for a full 5 minutes. It was insane, humiliating, and completely arbitrary, but Eliza had Mia and Jake to protect. The next day, Eliza drove to the market wearing her frayed silk pajamas. She stood next to the organic cabbages, and with tears running down her face, she sang a trembling version of a nursery rhyme for 5 agonizing minutes while other shoppers stared and laughed. When she got back into her car, her phone immediately chimed. "Good girl, Eliza," the text read. "You're learning that my rules are the only rules that matter." The isolation deepened. Sarah lost her job at the library after missing too many shifts and acting erratically. Andrew's work suffered because he was always home trying to play bodyguard. Their friends stopped calling because Eliza was too terrified to leave the house or answer a phone that wasn't the caller's. Their beautiful, ordinary life was crumbling because of one wrong button press. The financial pressure began to mount. Andrew took an extra job working nights at a warehouse far across town, a job he hated. He had to be gone from 9 in the evening until 7 in the morning, leaving Eliza alone with the children. The night he started that second job, the caller called. "Poor Andrew," he mocked, "working hard to protect you. What he doesn't realize is that all the money in the world won't stop me. Tonight, I'm coming to see you, Eliza." Eliza felt a scream bubble up in her throat. She locked every door, every window, every possible entry point. She grabbed the heaviest kitchen knife and sat at the bottom of the stairs, shaking her head and praying. The hours ticked by agonizingly slowly. Nothing happened. No breaking glass, no forced entry, no sound at all. Then, at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. It was the caller. Eliza answered it, her voice a raw whisper. "Did you really think I meant I was coming inside?" The caller chuckled. "I came asterisk asterisk inside asterisk asterisk your mind weeks ago, Eliza. I'm just here to see what I broke tonight." He then described her entire evening. He described the knife she was holding, the kind of pajamas she was wearing, the precise spot on the floor where she was sitting, and the tears that had dried on her cheeks. "I'm outside the front window now," he whispered. "Wave goodbye to your normal life, Eliza, because it belongs to me now." She crept to the window heart, hammering against her ribs. She couldn't see anything. The streetlights were dim and the lawn was dark. Suddenly, a single bright spotlight snapped on. It was blindingly bright, pointed directly at their living room window, and standing in the light, looking directly at her, was the caller. He wasn't wearing a mask or a hood. He was an unremarkable middle-aged man, slightly overweight, wearing a simple black rain jacket. His face, however, was utterly terrifying. It wasn't menacing or cruel. It was bored, completely devoid of empathy or emotion. He simply raised one hand and gave her a small, almost friendly wave. Then he turned and walked away, vanishing into the darkness, the blinding light turning off just as quickly as it had appeared. Eliza never saw the caller again. He never called or texted after that night. He simply vanished. But the cost was absolute. Eliza was a shell of her former self. The psychological trauma was so severe, she couldn't leave her house for over a year. She was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder and paranoia. Her career as a librarian was over. Andrew and Eliza's marriage could not withstand the constant pressure and the total breakdown of their lives. They divorced quietly, one year later. Andrew moved away, taking a job 2 states over. The worst part, Eliza had to move out of her beautiful suburban house, the place where her children grew up. She sold it and moved into a tiny ground floor apartment, convinced that she would never truly be safe again. The caller didn't steal her jewelry or her savings. He stole something far more valuable: her peace, her sanity, her marriage, and her entire future. All because she answered a phone call that was never intended for her. The police classified the entire thing as a series of unexplained harassment incidents that simply stopped. No arrests were ever made. The caller was never identified. The question remains, was the caller a professional stalker, a master manipulator, or just a deeply disturbed individual who randomly chose a victim and was simply having fun? Whatever he was, his actions proved that for some people, the most terrifying thing in the world is not what you do, but simply what you are a target, and it all started with one wrong number. So, what do you think happened to the caller? Did he find a new wrong number to terrorize, or is he still out there bored and waiting? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and tell me, where in the world are you watching this story from? Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one. Hello, strange, dark, and mysterious people. Today we leave the deserts and the deep oceans and venture into the quiet, unsuspecting suburbs, a place where the veil between worlds is often the thinnest. This is a terrifying tale of a house built on impossible geography of a new homeowner who discovered that his house was not a single dwelling, but a terrifying, shifting cluster of different times and realities, all accessible through a single innocuous door. This is the story of the house that was only 1 foot wide. Our main character is Thomas Vance, a 30-something software developer from the city who desperately wanted to escape the noise and chaos of urban life. He purchased an older, detached house in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, a house that had been on the market for an inexplicably long time, despite its low price and desirable location. The house was a typical 2-story colonial structure with white siding and a small, overgrown yard. It had one unsettling physical anomaly. The north exterior wall was built directly on the lot line, and according to the legal survey Thomas received, the wall itself measured exactly 1 foot wide. It was an impossible architectural feature, but Thomas dismissed it as an ancient surveying error or a strange local building code adjustment. The rest of the house seemed normal. Thomas moved in during the late autumn. The first few weeks were peaceful, filled with the sounds of unpacking and the satisfying quiet of suburban life. The strange events began in the basement. The basement was an old concrete space with a low ceiling and a persistent cold dampness. Thomas was trying to set up a new home theater system when he noticed a small wooden door built into the foundation wall near the chimney stack. The door was incredibly narrow, barely wider than a boot, and had a small, rusted iron latch. It seemed completely useless and purely decorative. He tried the latch. It clicked open easily. Thomas pulled the door open. He expected to see a crawl space or a concrete pocket. Instead, he saw a hallway. It wasn't a dark, dusty passage. It was a brightly lit, perfectly clean corridor lined with light oak paneling. The corridor was unnervingly narrow, exactly 1 foot wide, and stretched into the distance until it was lost in a haze of bright artificial light. The air pouring out of the opening was dry and carried the faint synthetic scent of new carpet and industrial cleaner. It was the corridor of an extremely modern, perfectly maintained office building. Thomas was stunned. This corridor was inside his house's foundation wall, a wall that was less than a foot thick. The sheer impossibility of the space violated every law of physics and architecture he knew. He was a rational man. He took photos, sealed the door, and immediately called his contractor, Mr. Henderson, a seasoned local builder. Henderson arrived the next day. He inspected the narrow door, the impossibly clean hallway, and the 1 foot thick foundation wall. Henderson scratched his head, ran his hands over the concrete, and after 30 minutes of speechless confusion, he finally said, "Mr. Vance, I've been building houses in this town for 40 years. That is not a closet, and it is not on any blueprint. That door is simply not supposed to be there." Henderson refused to touch it and left Thomas with a profound and terrifying problem. Thomas spent the rest of the week researching the history of the house. The previous owners had all moved out abruptly, citing unforeseen life changes. One particularly disturbing anecdote was from the 1950s, when a woman claimed her husband had walked through the wrong door and was permanently assigned to a new location. Driven by a mix of fear and professional curiosity, Thomas decided he had to explore. He purchased a military-grade headlamp, a body harness with a thick rope, and a professional-grade handheld GPS unit. He fastened the rope securely to a basement support beam and slowly, cautiously squeezed himself sideways through the narrow opening and into the 1 foot wide hallway. The moment he was fully inside, the air immediately chilled and the scent of ozone was overwhelming. He checked his GPS. It showed his current position as being in a wide open field 300 miles north of his actual location. The hallway existed in a different geographical space altogether. He walked for what felt like 2 minutes. The hallway was perfectly featureless. He was walking inside a paradox. Then he reached a new door. This door was a modern industrial steel hatch with a small electronic keypad. It was identical to the security doors found in high-tech corporate research labs. He tried the handle. Locked. He continued walking. The hallway abruptly changed. The oak paneling dissolved, and the walls were now lined with rough-hewn, damp stone. The air grew heavy and smelled of salt and decaying kelp. His GPS immediately shifted. He was now at an altitude of minus 50 feet, somewhere beneath the North Atlantic Ocean. The hallway had changed realities. He reached a second door. This one was a heavy, rusted bronze portal shaped like a diving bell hatch. It was covered in barnacles and locked tightly from the outside. Thomas knew he could not go further. He was deep within a structure that violated time, space, and reality, a structure built into a 1 foot space that only existed on his property. He started to retreat back to his basement, his heart pounding in his chest. As he passed the steel hatch of the office building, he paused and pressed his ear against the cold metal. He could hear a sound from within, the muffled, rhythmic clicking of computer keyboards and the low drone of human chatter. It sounded like an ordinary workday in a massive, modern office complex. As he listened, the narrow corridor began to vibrate. The stone walls of the deep-sea section began to emit a faint, sickly green glow, and the metallic smell of the office section intensified. The impossible space was destabilizing. Thomas scrambled back toward his exit. He was 10 feet from the wooden door when he heard something that stopped him cold. It was a sound coming from behind the steel office hatch, a new sound, not the clicking of keyboards, but a sharp, rhythmic, metallic knock. It sounded exactly like someone was tapping a heavy wrench on the inside of the steel door. The rhythmic tapping resolved itself into a pattern. Tap, 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 tap. It was Morse code. Thomas, who had briefly served in the Navy, understood the code immediately. The message being tapped out was a single, repeated word: help, help, help. He froze. There was someone trapped inside the modern office building. An office building that was inexplicably located inside the foundation of his century-old suburban house. He was about to shout back when the tapping suddenly stopped. It was replaced by a continuous, low-frequency hum, a sound that vibrated through the floor and into his bones. It was the same overwhelming, consciousness-shattering sound reported by the deep-sea crew in the previous story. Then the voice came. It was a male voice, muffled and distorted, but clearly audible through the thin steel of the hatch. "Do not help the man, Thomas Vance," the voice warned. It spoke with a synthesized, perfectly calm tone, a tone that suggested it was being generated by a computer. "The 1-foot passage is not for entry, it is for storage. You must close the aperture and maintain the perimeter." Thomas backed away, scrambling toward the exit. "Who are you?" he screamed, his voice cracking with terror. The synthesized voice responded instantly, its tone chillingly professional. "We are the Suburban Maintenance Authority. Your domicile is operating outside its acceptable dimensional envelope. The 1-foot section is now scheduled for compression. Failure to evacuate will result in times permanent structural integration **. The moment the voice finished, the 1-foot-wide hallway began to rapidly shrink. The walls of the corridor began to close inward, not slowly, but with a horrifying, smooth, mechanical speed. The distance between the stone and the oak paneling was rapidly decreasing, threatening to crush Thomas sideways. He squeezed his body flat against the wall, his chest agonizingly compressed. He threw himself through the final 10 feet, pulling himself out of the narrow wooden door and tumbling onto the concrete floor of his basement just as the oak paneling slammed together with a sound like two giant tectonic plates colliding. He slammed the narrow wooden door shut and threw the rusted iron latch. The latch, which had been simple, now snapped closed with a satisfying heavy clunk that felt entirely too modern and powerful for the old iron. He spent the next 2 hours huddled upstairs, listening to the silence of his house. The only sound was his own ragged breathing. The next morning, Thomas went back down to the basement. The narrow wooden door was gone. The foundation wall was once again a smooth, uninterrupted surface of concrete. There was no sign of a latch, a hinge, or even a seam. The 1-foot-wide corridor had been completely, physically erased. Thomas knew the truth. His house was a nexus point, a single point of structural stability in a suburb built on shifting realities. The 1-foot wall was the edge of his own reality, and the narrow passage was a temporary storage unit for forgotten places and lost people, all managed by the terrifyingly bureaucratic Suburban Maintenance Authority. He sold the house a month later at a steep loss, citing unforeseen structural issues. He never told the realtor or the new owners about the door. He moved to a large city apartment, seeking the loud, comforting noise of people and traffic. The chaos was safe. But 3 months after he moved, he was walking down a perfectly ordinary city street. He stopped suddenly and looked down an alleyway between 2 tall buildings. The alley was perfectly straight, incredibly narrow, exactly 1 foot wide. It stretched into the distance, lined with perfectly featureless white ceramic tiles. And at the far end of the alley, partially obscured by the haze, was a single, tiny, narrow wooden door with a rusted iron latch. Thomas knew the 1 foot wide space hadn't been destroyed, it had simply transferred. The Suburban Maintenance Authority had followed him. He stood frozen, staring at the door, when his cell phone in his pocket began to vibrate with a low, continuous hum. The vibration was so strong, it felt like it was coming from inside his chest. He didn't check the phone. He knew the source of the hum. He knew the message that was waiting for him. The terror is that Thomas is still living in the house. He is living on the perimeter of the house, trapped forever in the geography of the 1 foot space, waiting for the Suburban Maintenance Authority to schedule his next visit. The question is, which door will he enter next? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and tell me, where in the world are you watching this story from? Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.
Hello, strange, dark, and mysterious people. Today we leave the deserts and the deep oceans and venture into the quiet, unsuspecting suburbs a place where the veil between worlds is often the thinnest. This is a terrifying tale of a house built on impossible geography of a new homeowner who discovered that his house was not a single dwelling, but a terrifying, shifting cluster of different times and realities, all accessible through a single innocuous door. This is the story of the house that was only 1 foot wide. Our main character is Thomas Vance, a 30-something software developer from the city who desperately wanted to escape the noise and chaos of urban life. He purchased an older, detached house in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, a house that had been on the market for an inexplicably long time, despite its low price and desirable location. The house was a typical 2-story colonial structure with white siding and a small, overgrown yard. It had one unsettling physical anomaly. The north exterior wall was built directly on the lot line, and according to the legal survey Thomas received, the wall itself measured exactly 1 foot wide. It was an impossible architectural feature when he noticed a small wooden door built into the foundation wall near the chimney stack. The door was incredibly narrow, barely wider than a boot, and had a small rusted iron latch. It seemed completely useless and purely decorative. He tried the latch. It clicked open easily. Thomas pulled the door open. He expected to see a crawl space or a concrete pocket. Instead, he saw a hallway. It wasn't a dark, dusty passage. It was a brightly lit, perfectly clean corridor lined with light oak paneling. The corridor was unnervingly narrow, exactly 1 foot wide, and stretched into the distance until it was lost in a haze of bright, artificial light. The air pouring out of the opening was dry and carried the faint, synthetic scent of new carpet and industrial cleaner. It was the corridor of an extremely modern, perfectly maintained office building. Thomas was stunned. This corridor was inside his house's foundation wall, a wall that was less than a foot thick. The sheer impossibility of the space violated every law of physics and architecture he knew. He was a rational man. He took photos, sealed the door, and immediately called his contractor, Mr. Henderson, a seasoned local builder. Henderson arrived the next day. He inspected the narrow door, the impossibly clean hallway, and the 1 foot thick foundation wall. Henderson scratched his head, ran his hands over the concrete, and after 30 minutes of speechless confusion, he finally said, "Mr. Vance, I've been building houses in this town for 40 years. That is not a closet, and it is not on any blueprint. That door is simply not supposed to be there." Henderson refused to touch it and left Thomas with a profound and terrifying problem. Thomas spent the rest of the week researching the history of the house. The previous owners had all moved out abruptly, citing unforeseen life changes. One particularly disturbing anecdote was from the 1950s, when a woman claimed her husband had walked through the wrong door and was permanently assigned to a new location. Perfectly featureless, he was walking inside a paradox. Then he reached a new door. This door was a modern industrial steel hatch with a small electronic keypad. It was identical to the security doors found in high-tech corporate research labs. He tried the handle. Locked. He continued walking. The hallway abruptly changed. The oak paneling dissolved, and the walls were now lined with rough-hewn, damp stone. The air grew heavy and smelled of salt and decaying kelp. His GPS immediately shifted. He was now at an altitude of -50 feet, somewhere beneath the North Atlantic Ocean. The hallway had changed realities. He reached a second door. This one was a heavy, rusted bronze portal shaped like a diving bell hatch. It was covered in barnacles and locked tightly from the outside. Thomas knew he could not go further. He was deep within a structure that violated time, space, and reality, a structure built into a 1-foot space that only existed on his property. He started to retreat back to his basement, his heart pounding in his chest. As he passed the steel hatch of the office building, he paused and pressed his ear against the cold metal. He could hear a sound from within, the muffled, rhythmic clicking of computer keyboards and the low drone of human chatter. It sounded like an ordinary workday in a massive, modern office complex. As he listened, the narrow corridor began to vibrate. The stone walls of the deep-sea section began to emit a faint, sickly green glow, and the metallic smell of the office section intensified. The impossible space was destabilizing. Thomas scrambled back toward his exit. He was 10 feet from the wooden door when he heard something that stopped him cold. It was a sound coming from behind the steel office hatch, a new sound, not the clicking of keyboards, but a sharp, rhythmic, metallic knock. It sounded exactly like someone was tapping a heavy wrench on the inside of the steel door. The rhythmic tapping resolved itself into a pattern. Tap, 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 audible through the thin steel of the hatch. "Do not help the man, Thomas Vance," the voice warned. It spoke with a synthesized, perfectly calm tone, a tone that suggested it was being generated by a computer. "The 1-foot passage is not for entry, it is for storage. You must close the aperture and maintain the perimeter." Thomas backed away, scrambling toward the exit. "Who are you?" he screamed, his voice cracking with terror. The synthesized voice responded instantly, its tone chillingly professional. "We are the Suburban Maintenance Authority. Your domicile is operating outside its acceptable dimensional envelope. The 1-foot section is now scheduled for compression. Failure to evacuate will result in times permanent structural integration **. The moment the voice finished, the 1-foot wide hallway began to rapidly shrink. The walls of the corridor began to close inward, not slowly, but with a horrifying, smooth, mechanical speed. The distance between the stone and the oak paneling was rapidly decreasing, threatening to crush Thomas sideways. He squeezed his body flat against the wall, his chest agonizingly compressed. He threw himself through the final 10 feet, pulling himself out of the narrow wooden door and tumbling onto the concrete floor of his basement just as the oak paneling slammed together with a sound like two giant tectonic plates colliding. He slammed the narrow wooden door shut and threw the rusted iron latch. The latch, which had been simple, now snapped closed with a satisfying heavy clunk that felt entirely too modern and powerful for the old iron. He spent the next 2 hours huddled upstairs, listening to the silence of his house. The only sound was his own ragged breathing. The next morning, Thomas went back down to the basement. The narrow wooden door was gone. The foundation wall was once again a smooth, uninterrupted surface of concrete. There was no sign of a latch, a hinge, or even a seam. The 1 foot wide corridor had been completely, physically erased. Thomas knew the truth. His house was a nexus point, a single point of incredibly narrow, exactly 1 foot wide. It stretched into the distance, lined with perfectly featureless white ceramic tiles, and at the far end of the alley, partially obscured by the haze, was a single, tiny, narrow wooden door with a rusted iron latch. Thomas knew the 1 foot wide space hadn't been destroyed, it had simply transferred. The Suburban Maintenance Authority had followed him. He stood frozen, staring at the door, when his cell phone in his pocket began to vibrate with a low, continuous hum. The vibration was so strong, it felt like it was coming from inside his chest. He didn't check the phone. He knew the source of the hum. He knew the message that was waiting for him. The terror is that Thomas is still living in the house. He is living on the perimeter of the house, trapped forever in the geography of the 1 foot space, waiting for the Suburban Maintenance Authority to schedule his next visit. The question is, which door will he enter next? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and tell me, where in the world are you watching this story from? Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.
Hello, strange, dark, and mysterious people. Today we are going to a place that shouldn't exist. A place found in the vast, overwhelming expanse of the deep ocean. This is a story of a scientific discovery that became a terrifying psychological trap of a submersible team that found a structure built by something that was not human and a distress signal that whispered of utter inescapable despair. This is the story of the deep-sea diver who found a city that was still growing. Our story follows a deep-sea exploration team operating off the coast of a remote volcanic island chain in the South Pacific. The team consisted of 4 highly specialized researchers working for a private deep ocean research company. There was Dr. Elias Vance, the mission lead and chief marine biologist, Captain Alistair Graves, the submersible pilot and security chief, Elena Cortez, the hydroacoustics expert, and Javier Diaz, the mechanical engineer. Their mission was purely geological: map a series of recently discovered hydrothermal vents that were emitting unusual magnetic readings. They were aboard a state-of-the-art research vessel, the Triton, and their primary tool was a military-grade deep-sea appeared on the screen. It wasn't the irregular shape of a volcanic vent or a seamount, it was perfectly, jarringly geometric. Captain Graves Elias said, his voice tight with disbelief. "Run the low-frequency sonar again. I'm getting a perfect 90-degree angle return at 500 meters off the starboard bow." Captain Graves adjusted the controls, the sonar pinged again, the new data confirmed it. They were looking at a large structure of incredible regularity, a colossal shape that could only be artificial. It was too vast, too precise to be a natural formation. Graves carefully piloted the bathysphere toward the anomaly. The pressure outside was nearly 16,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a tank, and the water temperature was hovering just above freezing. The submersible's powerful external lights cut through the inky blackness. Then they saw it. It wasn't a wreck. It wasn't debris. It was a massive structure, stretching farther than their lights could penetrate. It was built from a material they could not identify, a dark obsidian-like stone that absorbed light but occasionally seemed to pulse with a faint internal sickly green glow. The structure was a tower, or perhaps a spire, that rose from the abyssal plain. My God, Elena whispered over the comms, her voice awestruck. It's a building. It's a city. What lay before them was undeniably architecture. Vast arches, immense columns, and sprawling horizontal surfaces that looked like bridges or walkways, all carved from the strange black material. The scale was overwhelming. They estimated the visible part of the structure alone was larger than a major metropolitan stadium. But the most chilling detail was that the city was not inert. As Elias peered through the thick viewport, he noticed that the lines of the structure were not fixed. They were moving. Slowly, imperceptibly, the edges of the blocks and arches were shifting, connecting, fusing into new geometric patterns. The city wasn't abandoned or ruined. It was growing or perhaps rearranging itself like a massive, infinitely complex machine. Then, Elena Cortez's voice cut in, frantic. Captain, I'm getting a signal. Low-frequency acoustic. It's not natural. It's a continuous, rhythmic thump-thump like a huge hammer hitting solid rock. And there's something else. A broadcast. She played the audio feed into the comms. It was a faint, high-pitched keening sound, a continuous loop of noise that sounded vaguely like static, but with a horrifying underlying quality. It was a distress signal, but one unlike anything they had ever heard. It sounded less like a plea for help and more like the exhausted sob of something that had been defeated long ago. Captain Graves immediately grew cautious. We don't know what this is. Could be deep sea sonar interference. We document it for 5 minutes and we ascend. Now, Elias, however, was mesmerized. No, Captain. That signal. Listen to the rhythm. It's too complex. It's conveying information. We need to get closer to the source. Against Graves' better judgment, Elias convinced him to approach. They piloted the bathysphere into an enormous ravine-like crevice between two colossal towers. As they moved deeper into the structure, the green glow intensified and the shifting of the stone blocks became more noticeable. Javier, the engineer, started reporting strange power fluctuations in the submersible system. We're losing auxiliary power, Dr. Vance Javier reported, his voice strained. The ambient magnetic field down here is incredible. It's fighting our propulsion. They managed to push forward another 50 feet. Elena pinpointed the source of the distress signal, a small rectangular opening on the side of one of the immense towers, a dark doorway that seemed to be pulsing with the sickly green light. Graves kept the submersible hovering about 20 feet from the doorway. They activated the robotic arm and mounted a high-resolution camera and a specialized hydrophone. The camera feed was chilling. The stone around the doorway was actively smoothing itself, closing and opening with the rhythm of the acoustic thumping. It was not carving stone, it was a living tectonic process. Then the hydrophone picked up something new, a sound much closer and much more terrifying. It was the sound of a human voice. It was a man speaking in a thick European accent, heavily distorted by the water pressure and the low-frequency hum, but undeniably human. Do not listen to the rhythm. The voice wailed, then broke into a guttural coughing fit. It is the song of the builder. It promises order, but only brings the structure. The city is alive. It feeds on the disorder of our minds to grow. I cannot leave. I have been here for 3 cycles. Elias and the team stared at each other in horrified silence. 3 cycles? What did that even mean? How long had this person been down here? Who is this? Elias shouted into the external microphone, his voice echoing uselessly in the water. What is your name? We are the Triton. We can help you. The voice returned almost instantly, but now sounding closer, clearer, and far more desperate. The builder knows you are here. He is rearranging the exit. He will not let you leave until you complete a section. You must build. You must fuse. Suddenly, the submersible was jolted violently. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into absolute darkness. Captain Graves frantically fought the controls. Javier, what happened? We've lost all external lights and propulsion is intermittent. It's the structure, Captain Javier screamed. It's trying to lock onto us. I'm reading external material, temperature spikes. It's fusing around the hull. Graves activated the emergency battery, and the internal lights flickered back on. Elias looked out the viewport, and his blood ran cold. The obsidian-like stone of the tower had extruded immense, dark, organic-looking tendrils. They were not mechanical arms. They were extensions of the city itself. These tendrils were slowly wrapping around the thick titanium hull of the bathysphere, testing the strength of the metal. Graves initiated maximum reverse thrust. The sub groaned, protesting the pressure and the magnetic interference. Slowly, agonizingly, the submersible began to move away from the massive pulsing doorway. As they gained speed, the distress signal intensified. The human voice now sounded like a terrifying screech of pure agony. "You must complete the section. You must build. Don't leave me with the rhythm." The builder is angry. He is coming for the disorder. Then, Elena noticed something on her sonar screen. The geometric structures around them were not just rearranging the exit, they were rapidly closing around the narrow ravine they had entered through. The window to the surface was shrinking. Graves had only one option. He set the thrusters to maximum overdrive, burning out 2 of the 4 motors. The bathysphere shot forward violently out of the closing ravine. They cleared the opening with mere feet to spare, and the massive obsidian structures slammed shut behind them with a deafening silent implosion sound. As they ascended out of the crushing depths, they noticed a horrifying change. The mysterious pulsing green light that illuminated the city below was now fixed on them. It followed them like a colossal malignant eye all the way up to 10,000 feet, where the light finally failed to penetrate the denser water. They arrived back at the Triton battered, psychologically devastated, and carrying a secret that could break the world. The captain immediately ordered the ship to full speed away from the coordinates. Their subsequent report to the research company was dismissed as mass psychosis due to the intense pressure and isolation. They were discredited, their footage deemed inconclusive, and the data was classified and buried, but the ordeal was not over for the crew. The psychological toll was catastrophic. Elena Cortez began to suffer from severe tinnitus, a constant, high-pitched keening sound. She claimed the sound was the voice of the desperate man trapped in the deep. She would spend hours staring at her phone screen, trying to decipher the complex rhythmic thump-thump of the builder, convinced it was the key to his escape. Javier Diaz, the engineer, began to draw. His apartment became covered in immense, meticulous architectural sketches, drawings of geometric towers and massive arches, all done in pencil and black ink. His drawings were identical to the structures they had seen on the ocean floor, but they were subtly different. They were his own designs for new parts of the city. He claimed the city had showed him where it wanted to grow next. And for Dr. Elias Vance, the mission Lead the Nightmare became physical. 3 weeks after the ascent, Elias was found in the storage bay of the Triton, which was docked in a safe harbor. He had locked himself in the bay and was using specialized welding gear. He wasn't welding metal. He was trying to fuse pieces of dark igneous rock together with immense heat and pressure, trying to replicate the obsidian-like stone of the city. He had covered the floor of the bay with vast, intricate sketches of new geometric patterns. When the security team found him, he was completely gone, staring blankly at the fusion weld in his hands. He was murmuring the same phrase over and over in a low, gravelly voice, a voice that was not his own. The rhythm is the key. You must complete the section. The builder demands order. He had succumbed to the deep-sea madness, the psychological imprint of the city. He became the second victim of the rhythm, a man trapped by a city that used disorder to recruit new builders. The terrifying conclusion is this: the deep-sea city was not just a relic. It was a conscious entity, a vast ancient construction that grew by drawing in nearby conscious beings, perhaps using them as some form of biological computer or an engine of construction. The man trapped inside the city was not an unfortunate scientist. He was merely the first in a potentially endless line of architects forced to build the impossible structure forever. And the reason they were able to escape? The city simply decided it wanted new builders. It decided to let them go to spread the pattern, the rhythm, and the blueprints for its growth into the world above. So what do you think the deep sea city was building? Was it a temple, a machine, or perhaps a cage for something even more terrifying than the builder itself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And tell me, where in the world are you watching this story from? Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.
This story is about two young men who, like many people, were looking for a little adventure. They were looking for something old, something mysterious, and they found it. But what they found wasn't a forgotten treasure or a harmless ghost written by a completely unhinged individual, detailing a ritual so dark and so specific that reading it alone felt like breaking some sacred ancient seal. This is the story of Asterisk Asterisk, the creepy ritual they found described in an old journal. Asterisk Asterisk. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where these stories are heard. Now, let's talk about abandoned places. The year is 2018, and our main characters are two college students, Alex and Ben, both 20 years old, who lived in upstate New York. They were urban explorers, or urbex enthusiasts, who loved crawling through abandoned hospitals, schools, and factories, documenting the decay with their cameras. Their goal that summer was to find the legendary forgotten home of Silas Reed. Silas Reed was a minor local historical figure, an eccentric, wealthy botanist who was rumored to have gone completely mad and vanished sometime in the 1940s. His sprawling, dilapidated estate was believed to be somewhere deep in the Adirondack foothills, far off the main roads. After weeks of searching historical maps and cross-referencing old land deeds, they found it. The place was magnificent, decaying, and terrifying. It was a massive Victorian-era mansion completely swallowed by the forest. Trees had grown up through the porch, and vines covered the brickwork like skin. The windows were either shattered or boarded up. Alex and Ben entered through a broken cellar door. The air inside was thick, cold, and smelled exactly like dead leaves and mold. They moved slowly, using their flashlights. They found the usual things you find in abandoned homes: rusted furniture, broken crockery, and dust everywhere. They spent maybe 3 hours exploring the lower floors, taking dozens of photos. They eventually found Silas Reed's study. It was a large room lined with bookshelves that were mostly empty. The large oak desk was still there, but everything on it was ruined by water damage, except for one thing: a small, dark wooden box tucked deep inside one of the drawers. The box was heavy and intricately carved with swirling, unsettling designs. Inside, they found a single item: a thick, leather-bound journal. It was protected by a layer of waxed paper, which is why, after 70 or more years, the journal was perfectly preserved. They quickly found out that the journal was Silas Reed's personal log, starting in the year 1935. At first, it was just the rambling thoughts of a lonely, educated man. He wrote about botany, the stars, and his growing frustration with human society. Then, the journal took a dark turn. Starting around the year 1938, Silas began writing about his belief that there were forces, asterisk things asterisk, that existed just outside of human perception. He wrote about the need to communicate with these things, not for knowledge, but for something he called asterisk, the unlocking. Alex and Ben were reading this aloud, their voices echoing in the huge, empty house. It was creepy, but they initially treated it like a fun piece of historical horror fiction. They flipped forward, closer to the end of the journal, to the last 20 or so pages. The handwriting had become frantic, huge, and almost illegible. The ink was different, darker, almost black, and it was here that they found it. The ritual. Silas had written down the ritual with extreme, terrifying precision, and he titled it simply asterisk, the cycle of three. Asterisk. I won't detail the whole thing, but the instructions were horrific and deeply specific. It wasn't about chanting Latin or drawing simple symbols. This was about physical acts performed at specific times, using specific materials. The ritual required the following. First, a precise type of rare toxic mushroom that only blooms in the fall, which Silas had cultivated. Second, a specific complex series of knots tied with human hair taken from the 3 points of the human body, the head, the wrist, and the ankle. Third, a continuous sound, a single, low-frequency hum produced by a specific type of antique brass bowl to be rung for exactly 55 minutes. And the final, most terrifying step, the ritual had to be performed at the very top of the house in the abandoned observatory, under the light of a new moon facing one of the 4 cardinal directions. The cardinal direction depended on the year of the performer's birth. Alex and Ben were thoroughly creeped out. They packed the journal and left the mansion. They took the discovery back to their dorm room and started doing research on Silas Reed. They discovered that Silas vanished in the autumn of 1942. He wasn't just missing. His entire house was quarantined by the county sheriff for a short time, though no official reason was ever given. The only local rumor was that he had a horrible accident involving some of his exotic plants. A few days after the discovery, Ben did something Alex thought was completely insane. Ben started collecting the required components. He found the antique brass bowl on an obscure online auction site, purchased for about $700. He found instructions for the toxic mushroom on a specialized botany forum. Alex was horrified. "Are you out of your mind? This is a madman's fantasy. You're treating it like a recipe." Ben, usually the more rational of the two, was unnervingly calm. "It's not fantasy, Alex. It's too specific. It's a mechanism. And I want to see what happens when the mechanism is activated." Ben was born in 1998. According to the journal's instructions, if his birth year was a multiple of 2 and 4, the ritual needed to be performed facing asterisk west, asterisk. The next new moon was less than 2 weeks away, falling on a Friday night. Alex tried everything to dissuade Ben. He threatened to tell the campus police. He threatened to burn the journal. Ben just secured the journal in a locked safe and started preparing the knots. He was cutting his own hair from his head and body, tying the complex braids exactly as described by Silas Reed. On the night of the new moon, Alex finally gave up trying to stop Ben. He knew Ben was going to do it, and he refused to be alone. At 11 o'clock at night, they drove back to the abandoned Silas Reed mansion. They climbed to the rickety observatory at the very top. The room was mostly glass, shattered in many places, making it extremely cold. Ben set up the brass bowl and the knotted hair in the precise configuration described. He ate a small piece of the mushroom just to taste, he said, because the journal warned that eating too much would cause transitory dissolution. At 5 minutes to 12 at night, Ben began ringing the bowl. The hum was deep, a resonant, almost painful tone that vibrated in Alex's chest. Ben sat, facing west, in the middle of the circle of knots, ringing the bowl steadily. Alex stood by the doorway, trembling, filming the entire thing on his phone, just in case. For 50 minutes, nothing happened. The sound was constant, the air was cold. Alex thought, asterisk, see? It's just junk. It's just noise. Asterisk. Then, at exactly 10 minutes to 1 in the morning, with 5 minutes left in the ritual, the air in the room suddenly went dead cold. Not just cold, but empty. The brass bowl stopped ringing. Ben was still holding the mallet, his hand frozen mid-swing. Alex whispered, Ben? Ben didn't respond. He didn't move. Alex walked over and tapped Ben's shoulder. Ben's skin was ice cold, and his body was rigid. He looked down at Ben's face. Ben's eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead, and they were completely glazed over, pure white. Alex screamed and grabbed Ben.